So let's get started. Welcome to the fourth in our January series on New Year, New Business. Today, we are pleased to have Alan Gorlick, and he's going to be talking about estimating startup expenses, a subject he is very conversant with and a subject that most of our clients at SCORE seem not to know about. Just as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and you will receive a link to it as well as a PDF of the slides in the next day or so. As a reminder, tomorrow, Thursday, is the last presentation in this series. It is on choosing the right business type, and we have attorney Sarah Castro-Potts presenting this topic. You'll be getting a link to join that webinar, so feel free to click on it and join us. Before we get started with today's webinar, I want to tell you a little bit about SCORE and our Minnesota chapter. Click, Alan, if you would. So SCORE is a nationwide nonprofit organization, and we are a resource partner of the Small Business Administration. They support us. SCORE provides free, confidential business mentoring. So if you are anywhere in the business process, contact us, and we will help provide you with the success tools you need. We have almost 90 volunteers in our chapter. Our chapter is the Minnesota chapter, which services Manatee and Sarasota counties. And recently we were recognized as a Diamond Chapter of Excellence, which is the highest award that can be presented. Since 1964, when SCORE started, they have assisted over 11 million clients. How do they know that? I don't know, but we're going with it. Click, Alan. We can help you in any phase of your business, from pre-startup or the startup phase or the growth phase or the exit phase. Just contact us. Click. Lastly, we'd encourage you to visit our website, visit minnesota.score.org. That actually is where you're going to find the worksheet that Alan is going to be referring to today. You can also request a mentor. Click. You can find other workshops or webinars. Click. You can locate podcasts. All of our recorded webinars are on our website. Click, and you can search our library of resources. Click. And lastly, I just want to thank all of our sponsors and community partners. They help us keep the lights on. Without further ado, Alan, I'm going to turn this over to you, and you are now in charge, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this subject.
I can't wait to hear either. Here's a little slide about me. I'll let you read it, but just so you know, this isn't my first time talking about venture capital or talking to people who need to raise money. So for starters, let's think about woman kills her husband by beating him to a pulp with a golf club. Now, this is not Tiger Woods. This is just a story. But anyway, she beats him up, kills him. The cops come and they look at this mess and they say, and one cop turns to the woman and says, "I've never seen anything like this. How many times did you hit him?" And she starts counting on her fingers, 8, 9, 10. She turns back to the cop and says, "Put me down for a 5. And I tell this because not only is it one of my favorite jokes, and not only does every golfer get it, but also because the point of this whole thing, if you remember one thing from today, it's don't lie to yourself. You don't want to lie to anybody, but let's start with don't lie to yourself, because I find that a lot of problems with people starting a business is they lie to themselves. There's magical thinking. It's going to be okay. Well, the product's not done, but we'll get it done. And lying to yourself is just, you might as well give it up now. It's just not going to work. And you're going to see a bunch of quotes from Winston Churchill. I think he's the right guy to help us understand what's going on here. But, you know, when you get started on this, you got to keep moving through it. You got to do that business plan. You got to do everything that's required to get your business off the ground. And today's presentation, no matter what you're going to set up, whether it's brick and mortar or online, a service business, these subjects apply to everybody. So hopefully you'll all get something out of this presentation. Now I'm starting with failure modes, which is kind of strange, right? Do I really want to start with a negative? But you need to be thinking about these things, and we're going to talk about it a lot in the next hour in order to make sure that you've raised enough money. So obviously the first thing is undercapitalization. If you don't have enough money, you don't have enough money. And maybe you could say these other four are subsets of undercapitalization. They're how you end up undercapitalized. But it's also possible to do all the right things and just end up with not enough money. So we need to talk about all of these things separately as well. And we will. But just to, give you poor planning, obviously, if you didn't think this through, you don't have a good business and you really have to plan it. But settling settling and magical thinking kind of go together. So you put your business plan together, and and based on the kind of business you have, maybe you need walk-in traffic, but you can't get the kind of location that prompts walk-in traffic. So you settle for being in a bad spot, and then nobody walks in. Or you settle for, maybe you need people to drive to your place. I had a client once who wanted to open up a coffee shop. And beside the fact that he was competing with a little company called Starbucks, he really understood coffee. He studied it like you wouldn't believe. But the town where he wanted to open up wouldn't give him enough parking spaces. And when I read his business plan, which was very well written, I just said, it's not going to work. He said, well, people will park somewhere else. And luckily, other people also told him that this magical thinking wasn't going to work. And he didn't open the coffee shop, which I think was disappointing for him, but losing $1 million would have been even more disappointing. And then lack of flexibility. And we talk a lot about that today too, because you need to seize opportunities. You can't just say, well, this is what we plan to do, so we're going to do it, come hell or high water. So you need to think all this stuff through. And like I say, don't lie to yourself. So how can you be successful? Well, you need to be clear-eyed. You need a business plan. And, you can have a 150-page plan, or maybe a one-page plan will do it. We have templates that you can get from SCORE. You can Google templates. There's a lot of ways to find what needs to be in a business plan. But the important thing is that you be clear-eyed about it. You understand who's going to buy from you, why they're going to buy from you, and how much money you're going to make. Or else, again, you're just hoping. And, there are businesses that can get by on hope. If you come up with a cure for cancer, you don't have to tell me who's going to buy it. I'm ready to invest. But most ideas aren't that good. And so you need to do this other stuff. And we're going to talk about each of these bullets in turn because they're all important. Before I do that, though, this is one subject that people kind of don't put a lot of attention to. And that's when you start a business, you need to think short term. When you're running a business, you want to think long term. You want the best long-term purchase agreements. You want the best long-term leases. You want the best prices on everything you're going to buy by making commitments. But when you start a business, you need a proof of concept. You need to get somebody to buy your stuff right away, prove that it works, even if it's just a trial. You need good references right away, especially if you're not initially raising all the money you're going to need. If you're going to go back for more money, you better have those first three bullets, or else you're going to get killed on valuation when you go back for more money. But also, if you can get good return on your cash, not only does it make you look good and help you raise more money, but you have the cash back. you got the cash back in the business by selling something quickly, and you can redeploy it. And we're going to talk about how you can turn fixed costs into variable costs, because that's one very good way to move your cash back into where you can use it. Now, a lot of people have heard of SWOT. It's taught in marketing classes, it's taught in strategy classes. And my experience with students using SWOT is they tend not to use it properly, even though they can tell you what the letters stand for. So for today's purpose, think about the strengths that matter when you're starting a business. So what are your core competencies? What are you actually, again, not lying to yourself, what are you really good at? It's not everything. Nobody's good at everything. Even if you're a Renaissance person, you're not good at everything. So think about what you're good at, and then think honestly about what the competitive advantages your company has. You know, can you build things cheaper? Can you build things better? Can you have better supply sources? Are you further along the learning curve, which means you've gone through the bad part of testing the product, and you know how to build it so it doesn't break, and somebody else wouldn't have that because they're not as far along the learning curve. Or maybe you have good relationships with suppliers or partners or potential customers. Those are good strengths for a startup business. To the extent you don't have the strengths you need, you have to decide, is it curable or is it structural? So it might be curable. Maybe you don't have a core competency, but it's easy to hire that competency, either through an employee or maybe by outsourcing it. So maybe, you know, the obvious thing is you've got a building and you've got employees and you want a cafeteria. Well, don't learn food service, just bring in a cafeteria company. Or maybe you have a restaurant and you'd like to have valet parking. Bring in a valet parking company. Don't learn how to park cars. That's not the reason you're in business. But if you have structural weaknesses, then that's much more difficult, and you may have to go back to square one and say, can we really run this business given that we can't do such and such, or we don't know how to do, or we have no source of supply, or whatever it is. I have clients from building houses, and they went through some terrible times the last year or so because lumber became so expensive. So it was kind of structural, but luckily it was temporary, so it became curable. Then you have to take these strengths, and when you look at your opportunities, it's not a repeat of your strengths. It's where can you leverage those strengths? Where can you take what you're good at and get somebody to pay you for it? And if you don't have any opportunities, well, you better find some, or else you don't have a business. Again, you have a great product that does cool things, but if you can't say in a paragraph who's going to buy it and how you can make money on it, then it's really not an opportunity, and you probably won't raise any money anyway. Threats, of course, are not a repeat of your weaknesses, but they're areas where you can be exploited, and they come from every direction. It's not just the obvious stuff. And we're going to talk about some of these threats because you really need to consider what you would do if you were hit by any of them, and be prepared in advance. And this is a great line. You've probably seen this. It comes around a lot, but it just again tells you that you got to plan for everything, but you got to be flexible. You got to be able to handle the real world when it hits you in the face. Or as I think Mike Tyson, who said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. I think that's what we have to be prepared for. Now, Diane mentioned at the beginning that we have a spreadsheet that you can use. And here's the link. It's also in the chat. But there are lots of spreadsheets. You can Google it, and you know, if you don't like ours, maybe you'll find another one you like better. But you do need spreadsheets. You do need to put real numbers down on real spreadsheets. And I'm not going to go over the whole spreadsheet. I want to go over the things that really relate specifically to startup expenses, because after all, that's what we want to talk about today. And our spreadsheet lists these categories for startup expenses. And we'll cover most of them, not all of them. I'm not going to say too much about the first two, because in my experience, I've never known a company to fail because they underestimated how much they're going to pay for rent, or they didn't realize that they had to improve the men's room before they could open the building. I mean, you know, that's not going to bring your company down. But these other things really do require a lot of thought, and so we're going to talk about most of them. First, we'll start with capital equipment. I mean, a lot of businesses require capital equipment. Startups I've been involved in all required capital equipment. And, you know, then it gets, again, back to thinking short term. You know, you might be better off to buy the computers. You might be better off to buy the desks and the trucks and whatever. But when you're thinking short term and you want to turn that money into the business as quickly as possible, don't buy, rent, lease, borrow, timeshare, use somebody else's stuff. Maybe you don't need the latest model. Maybe you get a great deal by buying a 3-year-old model that still does the job. And rather than saying we need enough equipment so everyone can work from 8 to 5, Get less equipment, work all night. Your time, your people's time is not as valuable as your cash. So think about ways you can turn capital equipment into time and invest the time and have less capital equipment. But one thing is, if you are getting older stuff or used equipment or borrowing somebody else's, it's more likely to break than if it's new. And it's more likely to not be under warranty. So you need part of your contingency money is to repair if it breaks, and also to deal with the downtime. If the equipment that's building the things that you're shipping is not building them, well, you still got to pay your people. You still got to pay your rent. So you need money to cover downtime when there's no money coming in. And these are very important contingencies that need to show up in real numbers on your real spreadsheet. And then here's some of the other kinds of contingencies that are going to come along. And again, we'll talk about each one because contingency planning is so important. And, when I talk to companies that have survived, they got past infant mortality and they're like in their 5th year of business. And I say, what do you say was your success? What made you different from other people? One of the most common answers I get is we were prepared for contingencies. We were prepared for bad times. We were prepared for redoing the product. We were prepared for competition. We were prepared, although no one specifically prepared for the pandemic, maybe they had prepared for bad times and they got through the pandemic where other companies couldn't. So in the product redevelopment, I've seen this so many times, every one of these things. You thought it worked, but it didn't. It worked, but it broke in 3 days, right? Because you can't test your stuff the way the real world tests it. No matter what you do, no matter how much you stress test your products, it's not the same as putting it in an environment where people are going to try things you didn't try. They're going to spill coffee on it. They're going to kick it. They're going to forget to turn on the air conditioning. There's all kinds of things that are going to cause you to have to do some redevelopment. Or the customer might just say, it'd be really great if you had this dial on the front, or if this thing was easier to read, or it had a different electric plug, or just, again, things you just had no idea they were going to think of this. And now you got to do it. You got to fix it or they're not going to buy it. And of course, competition isn't standing still. So you got to be ready for them to meet you with a product of theirs. Pricing constraints. You're going to sell this for $1,000 each, and turns out the market will only bear 800. Can you still make money? Or maybe your costs, you thought you'd sell it for 1,000 and you could build it for 700. Turns out you can only build it for 1,100. Well, what are you going to do now? Maybe you have to build it for 1,100 and sell it for 1,000 until you get enough volume. So you need to have money for that, and of course, trial periods. People may buy your stuff and not pay you for 3 months because they want to make sure it works. And maybe you never said that you'll take it back after 3 months. They have, a 30-day return. And so under GAAP accounting rules, you can book the sale. But you're just lying to yourself, because if it doesn't work in 3 months, they're not going to pay. So there's just no point in saying, well, GAAP accounting allows me to record the sale. You didn't get the cash. You aren't going to get the cash. And you better have enough to cover yourself through these trial periods. And then, of course, we mentioned competition already, but there's all different ways competition can get you. There's the obvious stuff. They can come up with something new themselves. They can undercut your pricing. Maybe they're a big company and they can survive for a long time, losing money on each thing, or just targeting the one thing. Used to see this a lot was when smaller airlines came along to challenge the big guys. And so they would take a route that the big guys were charging $500 and they do it for $100. Well, the big airlines said, all right, we'll charge $100 or we'll charge $80. It wasn't every seat on every flight, but they could advertise $80 and your $100 didn't look so good anymore. And we saw this a lot, and a lot of these small airlines went out of business because the big guys could hold their breath longer. Also, they can just disparage you, and they will. Their salesman will come out and say, you're a little company, you don't know what you're doing. They've heard that your products have failed. They've heard that people got hurt. It doesn't have to be true. It's just going to come along and you have to be in a position to have the money to fight back and to show that these things aren't true, or if they are true, to fix them. You may also find that your competitors have agreements in place with the people you thought you would sell to. I think a great example, if you remember back to the great TV series, The Sopranos, in one season, they spent almost the whole season around the concept that Carmela wanted to get a divorce from Tony. And so what Tony did is he visited every fantastic divorce lawyer in New Jersey and got an hour of consultation with that divorce lawyer. And then as Carmela went to each one, they said, well, we're sorry, we can't help you. We're already helping your husband. And, obviously in the real world, there's more than a half a dozen great divorce lawyers, but I think you get the point that you can just run up against corporate agreements that you didn't expect. And all of a sudden you've got some competitive surprises that you need to have money for. Or political influence. They can make your product, is non-compliant somehow. And you just never thought anybody could do that to you, but it happens a lot. So again, you need to not necessarily anticipate all these things because you don't know what you don't know, but you need your spreadsheet should show money so that either that you have now or you can easily get so that you can take care of these competitive surprises. Regulatory stresses. This is one that we see more and more and more. One of the reasons is that, at least in my opinion, most people don't care about regulation as long as it doesn't affect them, right? So if you hear that regulators are going after the airlines and they're making the planes safer, you say, great, good idea, go do it. Or they're beating up the drug companies to make the pills safer. Wonderful, let's go do it, right? You don't realize that, of course, it's adding to everyone's cost and may not be making things safer at all, just maybe making more paperwork. Anyway, when it hits you, maybe you knew it was coming, but you had no idea you had to hire $1,000 an hour lawyers to fight it. Or maybe it's a rule that just, really, that applies to me? I didn't know. Or one of my favorites is jurisdictions you didn't consider, right? You're making a medical product and the Federal Communications Commission is coming after you because it requires earphones to use or something. It requires a radio signal and you just didn't even think they had jurisdiction. Or you're in Florida and what is the state of Arizona beating you up about? Well, you got one client there and now they have jurisdiction. So you just have to, again, what you know, you can say you can put money aside for, but you also need money for what you don't know. And your competitor can create, if they have political influence, they can sick the regulators on you. Say, well, this guy, he didn't worry about the OSHA rules for his night shift. And maybe you did, maybe you don't even have a night shift, but the regulators are there and you need the lawyers to fight back. So again, it's just stuff that either you need money or you need a place you can get the money if this happens. Now, supply constraints, that's a timely issue, right? Been in any supermarket lately, you see the empty shelves, you know that there are supply constraints everywhere in the world. Probably worse than anybody expected, certainly worse than I expected. And so one of the things we say now is the stuff we used to teach you about inventory management, not so good anymore. Maybe you need some inventory in case your suppliers can't come up with just-in-time inventory that you used to use. Or maybe you need contingent designs. Like I'm sure everyone's heard that the car companies suffered a lot because of chip shortages. Well, there's still cars on lots, right? You can go buy a car, maybe not the exact car you want. One of the things they're doing is contingent designs. They're saying, okay, we needed a chip for the lumbar support, that to move backwards and forwards, depending on how much lumbar support you need on your back. Well, we'll sell the car without lumbar support, and we can add that chip later. It's not hard to put it in, and they tell you, here's exactly what you want. It doesn't have lumbar support. I don't think anybody walks away from the perfect car because of the lumbar. So it's a contingent design. It's not a big deal, but it enabled them to get cars out there. And so you need to do that too. You need to say, where else can I get what I need? And how can I change my product if necessary to deal with the fact that there were supply constraints? Can this plastic become that plastic? Can plastic be replaced by wood or vice versa? Maybe just temporarily. But not only you have to think of it, you need to have the money for it. Again, it's money is really the issue here. Put it on a spreadsheet, be ready for it. And then, of course, there's the full pivot. And that's more common than you might think. So, you know, a lot of companies, you talk to the, again, you know, like talk to the 5-year survival, because that generally, if you make it 5 years, you're probably going to make it. And you know, you just pick a random hypothetical example. Company is making these fantastic flagpoles, and they're just making money hand over fist on flagpoles. And you say, wow, how did you ever think of that? What a great business. And, you know, if you finally get them to admit what really happened is they were a fencing company. And it turned out everybody in Venice, Florida who needed a fence already had a fence. And so someone said, you know, these fence poles will work as pretty good flagpoles. And next thing they know, that all of Sarasota County is very patriotic. They all wanted a place to hang an American flag. And they're doing great things because they were willing to pivot, willing to change emphasis, change the product, or even big companies. If you think about what happened to Microsoft, you know, Steve Ballmer was, you know, thought of as a decent president, but really he was running the company into the ground. Stock price dropped in half during the time he was president. New guy comes in and he changes emphasis. Right? It wasn't so much changing the product. He just said the people we refuse to work with, we're going to work with them now. The places we were charging for our product that nobody was going to pay, we're just going to give it away. And it was a major pivot. And Microsoft just soared after that. And they're still soaring. They're still doing fantastic. And even if you're mostly on Apple as I am, you've got a lot of Microsoft products in there. So they did a pivot and it really helped. And you have to be willing. That comes back to no battle plan, surviving contact with the enemy. You need to look at opportunities, say, all right, let's go back to our SWOT analysis. Here's what we're good at. The opportunities we thought we had are not producing for us, but our core competencies can do other things. And, you know, it might even be your lifeline. So you have to be willing to pivot, and you have to look for places to pivot. And again, here's Churchill saying, you know, it's not enough to say we tried. You just have to make it happen. There's nobody else you can rely on but yourself when you're starting a business. Now, I want to talk about the cash conversion cycle. We're going to have, I think, plenty of room at the end as well. I'm talking fast, so we'll have plenty of time for questions. But I do need to say this cash conversion cycle, it's 3 slides. When I teach this to my finance students, it takes 2 hours. So we could easily use up a fair amount of our time because it's that important. The cash conversion cycle is how long does it take to turn the cash you spent into the cash you received? And obviously you want to receive it before you need more. And so this is just a very simple example. But let's say you're manufacturing something, but every company has a cash conversion cycle. It's just easier to picture a manufacturing company. So you buy your materials, your parts, your whatever you need to build it. And then we call that the inventory period. You build it, you ship it to your stores or whatever, you have it in inventory, and eventually you sell it, or you hope you'll sell it. And then you got to wait to get paid, right? And I find a lot of companies, even big companies, don't pay enough attention to that. But until you get paid, you don't have the money. You just don't. Now, the bottom is what you're going to have to pay while you're waiting to get paid, right? So you got to pay for the stuff you bought. You got to pay for your employees. You got to pay your taxes and your rent. And if there's a long period, the cash conversion cycle that you haven't been paid, you got to come up with the money from somewhere else. And the better you can do to shorten that last bracket, the less cash you need in your business. So let's talk about each category separately. Let's talk about the top. That's where you built stuff, sold it, and are waiting to get paid. Well, of course, I said on a previous slide that maybe just-in-time inventory is not a great idea. but to the extent you can keep as little inventory as possible, you will have spent less money on inventory. So you'll have the cash instead of owing it to somebody else. And one way to do that is just good inventory management. Look at what's selling and what isn't selling. Look at what you need to ship every day and have it close to where the trucks load up. Maybe you're not big enough to worry about that yet, but everybody has some inventory management issues. When I lived in England, Sainsbury's, which was a big supermarket, kind of like a Publix, it's in that section of the marketplace. They did a survey every week and asked people what their favorite products were. And they said, tell us what you want and we'll have it around. And it became a virtuous cycle for them, because by finding out what people wanted, obviously they'd have more of that. But when they put it out on the store and they said, this is what people voted for, they sold more of that. So it became a virtuous cycle. You walk in, you say, gee, what kind of beer should I buy? Oh, look at this display. This is their favorite beer. Or if you buy on Amazon, they do that, right? You look at 20 different things and one says, this is our top seller. Well, might as well buy what everybody else wants, right? And so then they get that virtuous cycle of storing what people want and getting people to want what they're storing. Also, if you accept credit cards, MasterCard and Visa give you the money the same day. It's like taking a check. So that makes your receivable problem go away. You're not waiting for people to pay you. To the extent that you want them to pay, you have to track it. I ran a high-tech company in California. It was as high-tech as you could get. We were verifying that electronic chips worked and were testable. It was really the leading edge. But I found that we weren't doing a good job getting paid. And maybe you don't need to send people around to break kneecaps, but you do need to get paid. And so what we did is we got our accounting clerks together, and you can picture what kind of people are accounting clerks. They're introverts most likely, and these were all women. They're all women introverts. And we sat them down and we said, here's what you're going to do. You're going to call people who owe us money, and you're going to collect the money. And they were like, oh my God, I can't do that. We said, yes, you can. You can do it, and you will do it. And so we gave them pep talks. We got them lots of caffeine. We listened in on the calls, and it was hard. When they called, they'd say, hi, this is Mary from ICOS, and I hate to bother you, but we got this invoice. I mean, really, that's what the call sounded like. 2 months into it, they sounded like Tony Soprano saying, we're going to send 2 guys over, and you really don't want to talk to them, so maybe you ought to pay us. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it was that good. Within 2 months, they were turning 60-day receivables into 1 week receivables. And to the extent that you can't threaten or cajole your clients, you can borrow against your receivables. If you're selling to good people, I ran a multinational company from the UK, and you would never have heard of my company, but you would have heard of every one of our customers all around the world. And so the British government, wanting to support exports, would lend us money against our receivables. So we had no receivable collection period. We'd sell something and the British government would give us the money, because they knew that our clients were that good at paying. So borrowing against receivables is a great plan. Or you can do what's factoring receivables, which is virtually the same thing, except rather than borrowing against it, you actually sell your receivables to somebody else, and then they send 2 guys around to break kneecaps. But you're out of the picture. So you really want to borrow against rather than factoring if you can, because factoring is your clients aren't going to be too happy if they hear from the factoring company, or what's more likely called a collection agency. Nobody really wants to hear from them, but sometimes you have to do that because you have no other way to get the cash. And then at the bottom, right? So remember that the first arrow was how long your payment terms are, right? And I want to make it really clear, I'm not suggesting that you don't pay. I'm suggesting you get better deals. So rather than agreeing to a 30-day commitment, agree to 60, agree to 90, but pay in the time you agreed to. So if you get them to say, all right, we can't give you, we'll let you out of 30, but we need 45, pay in 45. Don't pay in 95 after agreeing to 45. But longer payment terms means you hold the money longer while you're waiting for your customers to pay you. Or what's very common in all kinds of businesses now is inventory on consignment. It's in your store, but you didn't pay for it. You don't pay for it until you sell it. And I think you would be amazed if you went to walked around Macy's, found out how much is on consignment, or walked around Best Buy and found out how much is on consignment. That it's in their store, so it costs them something. They need the floor space and the employees and the insurance and so forth, but they didn't pay for the stuff till they sell it. And if they don't sell it, often it goes back without being paid for. So any inventory you can do on consignment would certainly help. And you can use business credit cards. I mean, you can't turn on a TV without seeing ads for business credit cards from Chase or Capital One. They often have better perks, more miles or more points than the personal credit cards. And again, you've given yourself an extra 30 days or so to pay for something by using the card. So, but the cash conversion cycle, obviously until you're selling stuff, it doesn't come into play, and it might be 6 months down the road from when you start. But you really need to pay attention to that, because it's going to change the amount of cash you need by a lot. If it takes your clients 60 days to pay, and you're owed $60 million. Well, if you could get that down to 30 days to pay, you're only owed $30 million, and that's 30 million in your pocket. Now, if you're a startup, you're not going to be in the millions yet, but you might be in the thousands, and it's the same math. It's really important to manage this and to not let the receivables get away from you. The last thing I want to talk about is advertising and promotional. I put it last, not because it's least important, but because you probably have lots of other seminars on these subjects. So I thought if we ran out of time, we'd drop this. But I think we have plenty of time to talk about it. I love this line. Everybody in advertising has heard it, and it's true. I mean, I've advertised I've bought ads for all kinds of companies, and the truth is, we don't know till it happens. So you need a plan. I've actually done seminars on how to come up with performance metrics for advertising, because it really is important to determine whether you're getting your money's worth. And if you talk to the people who sell you ads, you say, I need some help, especially with magazine ads. I've seen this so many times. You say, my ad doesn't seem to be working. What do you recommend? I guarantee what they're going to recommend is you need to do it more. You need to buy bigger ads and show it more often. People need to see your ad 100 times. Your 12 times isn't going to do it. And maybe they're right, but that hardly is helpful. So you need some performance metrics of your own. You need ways to find out who's seeing the ad, who's buying because of the ad, who hates the ad. Maybe you can do an A/B test where you run a different ad in a different part of the country or a different magazine and see which one does better. As a startup, don't ignore the free stuff. There's Google My Business. I think we at SCORE have whole seminars on how to use Google My Business. It's free, and that's the first thing. When someone comes in and says, I need an optometrist near me, or I need pizza near me, or whatever it is, when they put in near me, they get the Google My Business page, and you need to be on it. It's free, but you need to be on it. And there'll be a link from there to your website, but they won't go to your website first. They'll go to Google My Business, and there'll be a map and all kinds of good stuff. If you're not on it, you'll probably never get them as far as your website. Use LinkedIn, use Twitter, use whatever other social media that's good for you. Facebook probably is good for a lot of startup businesses. I didn't put it here just because I didn't think of it, so I'm not on Facebook, but Facebook is probably just as good as a free way to get your word out, to interact with your customers, to get them active on your page. What better way to build loyalty than to get people active on your page? Do press releases. They're free. You just release them, you send them to the newspapers. They won't use them all. Maybe, you're releasing information they don't care about. But you would be amazed how desperate newspapers are for news. You think, well, news is smashing them in the face. But there's just so many fires and things like that they can write about. And they like press releases. And often they just use them verbatim. Put their own byline on it as if they wrote it. But it's your press release. And to the extent they're going to write about you, get some good press. One way to get good press is to donate to a charity or create a charitable event. Like, let's say that the so-and-so society is going to have a dinner or a coffee or a cocktail party at my office, and come and learn about this charity and give them. We're going to give them $10,000, or we're going to match every donation, or however you do it. It's really cheaper than advertising. You'll get the good press, and you'll actually be helping a charity. I mean, there's almost no downside to doing things like that as a promotional way to get your business name out there. And then digital. You want to be on digital, even if it's just banner ads. Digital is cheaper than print, and I don't know if it reaches more people or fewer people. It depends on where and when, but it's cheaper than print. And then, of course, print, I'm not saying it's a last resort, but it's the most expensive one. So you want to at least investigate all these others before you decide to buy print advertising. And that should be the one also that's subject to the most performance metrics. Now, this is probably the most famous quote from Winston Churchill. In my research, I discovered he never said that. Now, I guess no one can say for sure who's right about it, but what he actually said, which is, I guess, just as good, is never, never, never give in. And he didn't say it in uniform to a country at war. He said it to a graduating class from a boys' prep school. And he was talking to them about, you're embarking on the real life now, and never, never give in. Do what you have to do. Follow your dream. I guess it was a great speech, because he was good at great speeches. But it ended up being quoted like this. And this is just as good for today for us, that once you get it together, your time isn't worth anything. Just put in as much time as you need. If you know you're on the right track, keep going and make it happen. But make sure that you're not undercapitalized, because it can kill a great idea. And with that, we have some time for questions.
That was wonderful, Alan. I was so entranced that I forgot to unmute myself. Talking about undercapitalization, I was just reading in today's newspaper, and a restaurant in Sarasota that had a grand opening in December has announced its closing, and this is the end of January.
Oh my.
And it makes you wonder, where did they go wrong? Was it a personal thing? And that's certainly possible that something happened to the owners. It didn't indicate, but I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder if it was undercapitalization, or it was supply, or any of the other things that you talked about in your presentation.
Well, there's so much that can go wrong with a restaurant, but I used to consult to restaurants. I spent 2 years consulting only to restaurants. And I can tell you that the biggest infraction I saw was the magical thinking. Magical thinking. Yeah.
Yes.
This is going to work. But right after that, running a restaurant, restaurants have what we call high operating leverage, which means their fixed costs are very high. And so the difference between 10% more business or 10% less business can make a huge difference to whether they're profitable or not. And like, you might drive by a restaurant, the parking lot seems full, say, oh, they must be doing well. But if you counted the cars and you realize that 10% of the spaces are empty, that's enough for them to not be doing well, because they're that close to break even.
Well, believe it or not, we have no questions. You apparently did such a sterling job in your presentation that, oh, wait, I spoke too soon. At what point, this is from Minnie, at what point do we switch from thinking about short-term funding considerations to long-term lease versus buy? Is it after establishing a 5-year track record?
Well, I guess that's a whole seminar into itself, but to give you a short answer, I would say it's when you feel like you have traction, when you feel like this is really gonna go now, right? We're not afraid the product's not gonna work. We're not afraid nobody's gonna buy it. We're not afraid we can't get our parts. It's happening. It's really happening. People love our product. We only have 10 customers, but they're all very happy. They're going to buy more. The assembly line is working, or competitors are not surprising us. We just feel like this is going to go. It really is now. Then maybe you start looking for long-term deals, but don't do it too soon. Do bad deals that are short-term for a while, just to make sure you really have that traction.
Great. She thanks you for that answer. What's the best way to find a good banking partner? This is a good question for you, Alan.
Well, a good banking partner is, I don't know. I think it's trial and error to find a good banking partner. And if you're talking about a good source of funds for your business, I think we've got another seminar coming up on how to do that. But in terms of a good banking partner, I think it's a personal thing. I think you got to go to the bank and sit down with your banker and talk to them and see, how. I mean, fortunately I've had private bankers more than once over the years, and it's great. I mean, they know you, they know what you need. They're willing to bend the rules when they have to. But it's a personal thing. There's just no, it might be at a little bank here in town that only has one branch, or it might be at Chase or Bank of America. But it really comes down to, do you have a banker? This is not something we want to do with with whatever teller happens to be available, or whatever call center is operating from the Philippines that can help you.
If I could put in a plug for SCORE, if you have a SCORE mentor, they can actually open the door for you to some of our banking partners, and might make it a little bit easier for you to get in there, because we can tell you who to ask for, who to talk to in the bank, not just go to Fifth Third Bank and walk in and see if you can find someone.
Yeah, I mean, I have accounts at the big bank and at the little bank. They serve different purposes for me, but it's the little bank where they know me.
Let's see, Scott just posted something. I run a technology startup. I have supplier backing in terms of materials and services. I'm coming up on the time to raise capital to prototype the technology. Any suggestions on how to approach my suppliers for capital?
Now that's interesting. That's a good place, though. I mean, if they have money and they want you to succeed, it's almost like the obvious. Just tell them. So, we're in this together. You have money, I don't. I'm willing to make a really good deal for you. Maybe you have to give them part of your business. Maybe you have to give them royalties. You need to be open-minded. Your success is more important than the granularity of exactly what deal you do. I've seen so many venture-funded companies where you'd say to them, well, you gave up too much of the company, and now they're millionaires. So really, they gave up too much? And I've seen some that said, well, I'm not going to, they can't fool me. They can't have that much of my company. And now they're janitors. I mean, it's just, it's ridiculous. But you have to be really open-minded and make a deal, any deal that gets you the cash.
Good. All right, I think we have, let's see, is creating a business plan completely essential for a essential for a successful business? Is creating a business plan completely essential for a successful business?
Well, the elements of the plan are essential. So, we at SCORE have business building plans. They're templates, they're spreadsheets, call them what you want. They're not very long. They're not hard to do. So certainly that's a good first step. But if you're going to go out for serious money, you need a serious business plan. You need one that has audited financials, that really spells out what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, what your milestones are, and so forth. But you got to at least be able to say in a paragraph, as I said at the beginning, here's what we do, here's who's going to buy it, and here's how much money we're going to make. So that's a paragraph. That's not a tough business plan to write. But as soon as you want someone else to give you money, you're going to need to put a lot of meat on these bones.
Okay, what's the quickest way to get funding? Do you need good credit?
Oddly enough, no.
Okay.
We've got a seminar coming up on funding, so I don't want to preempt that too much. But unless you're looking for a personal loan, I mean, I want to start my business, I need $10,000. Well, you can do that on a personal loan. You need good credit for that. If you need $10 million, unless your credit report is so bad that you just look like a derelict, I don't think your credit rating is going to make that much difference, whether it's 800 or 750 or 710. I've never seen that as an issue. But I know once I was starting a business and I went to see my personal banker with my, I thought, very nicely done business plan. And he starts reading it and he's asking me all these questions. And finally I saw where he was headed with this. And I said, you're going to want me to put my house up as collateral, right? He said, well, yeah, I don't have any other collateral. I said, then, all right, shred the business plan. Let's just do a home equity loan because that's a lot cheaper than a business loan. Right. And that's what we did. So,
and in essence, that's what he wanted you to do. Yeah, good. All right, well, I think our time is up and we have no more open questions and people are saying, thank you, Alan, and I will join in on that. Thank you, Alan. It was very informative and well presented. Thank you so much. I know that you'll be back because I've got you on the schedule.
Okay, if you want more information, certainly we have a great website. You can ask for a mentor. You can Google some of these subjects. There's a lot of material on a lot of this stuff. But, ask us for help. That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for. Absolutely. That's what we're here for. We really want to help you. We want to help you succeed. So thank you all for coming. And again, thank you, Alan. See you maybe tomorrow for our next webinar on choosing a business type, identifying not what kind of business, but how you should structure your business. We have an attorney here who can help you with that. So hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. It's good stuff. Come tomorrow because if you think that you can just hide behind an LLC, not so much in Florida anymore. You really need to know the ins and outs. Oh, one of those cliffhangers. Turn in tomorrow and find out. Thank you all. Bye-bye. Bye.